Hey guys, so today I have a really important theory to share with you today, and it's about VPNs and Tor. You know, a lot of times when we read on Tor, a lot of people say, well, you need to add a VPN to Tor. I'm going to be explaining how this can be turned directly against you today on this video. And this is something I haven't heard anyone talking about directly, and I wasn't sure if I was going to do a public video on it, so this particular recording is going out to members first, and I may make it public at some point, but I don't want to give ideas to people who are malicious. So the reason some posts stay members posts is just to prevent sharing bad ideas. And so today we're going to be talking about where a VPN can turn on you. Now there's other videos out there like this, but none talk about this one, this theory I have. So this is a theory of mine. I covered VPNs and who can you really trust with VPNs, and also in that coverage we also talked about how several VPNs, some of the largest VPNs, were all bought up by a company called Cape Technologies, which just happened to be known in previous stories. And I talk about how they had a history before Cape Technologies. They were previously called Crossrider, so same people involved, and they had a concerning past with data collection, malware, and browser hijacking, and connected to specialized Israeli surveillance units. So there's another thing. Think about Pegasus. So we know that the owner was in the Panama Papers. Crossrider pled guilty to illegal hacking. Well, let's get to the point. So today what we're talking about Tor over VPN, VPN over Tor, whatever you want to do. I'm going to tell you why you may want to think about that a little more. So we can see a normal Tor connection on this diagram here. This is you connecting to Tor. You connect to the entry guard, or as I would suggest, if you have serious concerns or you just want to be as safe as possible, connect to a bridge. And my personal preference is the Snowflake bridge, as it is run by various volunteers around the world. For example, you can install it in as a browser edition, so it can actually be a browser plugin that allow you to enable it to let other users connect to Tor. So then you become basically that entry node, making the connection from a user to the Tor network, and then routing through that network. Encrypted, this node only knows, how to reach this one, but it doesn't know which one this one is, and so on. And so the data is unwrapped just enough to get to the next destination, and so on and so on. Same for each node. Same properties apply. Now, one thing we'll hear a lot about is, well, you need to be using a VPN server before you connect to Tor. And a lot of people have good reason for that. They're concerned about their ISP, but also bridges also help to mimic other things. Like, for example, a Snowflake bridge mimics the voice or video calling protocol, so it appears more like a video or a voice call. So it does help to obfuscate that traffic, and bridges are not listed in the public node directories. So we can see articles all the time. They're always telling you, you need a VPN. You can't use Tor without a VPN. It's just not safe to use Tor without a VPN. Well, I would actually say that it is safer in a lot of cases to not use a VPN with Tor at all. And this has been a long debate, but you'll see many websites out there. This one's a pretty popular one. It talks about and critiques Tor and tells you why you want to use a VPN with Tor. And so they say you should connect to a VPN that connects to Tor to the internet. So this is your VPN server, whatever it may be. You have to really be careful about your VPN server choices. I never, I'm not sponsored by a VPN. I don't put out recommendations in general for VPNs just because of all the unknowns. And today's video should tell you exactly why I feel that way. So what you need to consider when you're routing your traffic through Tor is Tor is there to protect you. The nodes are not there to trust each other. There is a lack of trust already between those nodes. Now, the problem comes when you are connected to a malicious entry node. And if that malicious entry node happens to also run or monitor that exit relay's traffic, they could potentially correlate that. So they could see that you are the one connected at this point in time, downloading at this data pattern. So with correlation, they can see if they're able to watch this one and this one at the same time. Let's say, for instance, they run the entry nodes of several hundred or whatever it is, and then they also run the exit nodes at several hundred of those. Now, the chances of you using both are not huge, so the risk is mitigated in some way because that's how the network's designed, but the risk is there. So it is potential for, if they ran enough entry nodes and enough exit nodes, that they could then correlate your connection in and your download. Say you do huge downloads. That's another reason they warn you about downloading large files, because that can be correlated. So if you're downloading several gigabytes, you might be the only user doing that. So in that way, you stand out a little more. Now, this is only someone who can actually observe this traffic, or at least can observe the traffic from the exit relay and see where they're connecting. So if they see that a destination has a huge download happening, and you happen to be the only user on Tor that is making that huge download, so see, as you can see, that could be an issue if it's being monitored in that way. Now, let's say we add a VPN into the mix. How might this affect the situation? Well, they say, well, you connect to the VPN server and that VPN server hides you from the Tor network. Sure, it does. It actually does mask your IP address. But take this into consideration. Here's my theory. My theory is that there are those who run VPN services who may also be running exit nodes. Did you get that? Those who run VPN services may also be running exit nodes. Do you know what that means? Well, that means that they are in the perfect position as a VPN service provider that pushes Tor, that pushes using their VPN with Tor, that they can nearly guarantee that much of their users are going to connect to their VPN and then into Tor. And then if they're also, that same organization is running exit nodes at the scale of hundreds, maybe even, possibly even thousands, less likely, much less likely. I'm also going to talk about how Tor protects users by managing community with the Tor node operators. So we'll get into that as well. But the point is that if you are connecting to a VPN server, you're placing a lot of trust in that server. You're also especially placing even more trust if you're using Tor with that VPN, because all they have to do is knock you offline. All they have to do is knock your VPN server offline for a moment. If they control that exit node and then they note that it has been knocked offline, the connection is cut, they could correlate that. They could correlate that if they control both the exit node that you're using and the VPN server that you're using. So instead of having to control the entry nodes, which would be more challenging, by starting a VPN company, you become the new entry node to the Tor network. It's the perfect plan to de-anonymize users, to run a VPN service, make it highly popular, spend millions in advertising, as has been done and this story talks about. Now, I'm not claiming any of these companies are involved in this. I'm just relaying my earlier article just to relate to the subject. But I really want people to consider this possibility, that when you use a VPN to connect to Tor, you're placing a whole lot of trust in that VPN, because that VPN service provider could also be a major exit node operator. And you may not hear this from various organizations, because I haven't heard anyone talk about this theory. This is just a theory I thought about, and I think it's a very viable theory that there could be some kind of, and we do know already that the Tor node has been denial of service attacked to simply de-anonymize different onion sites, to de-anonymize users. but especially onion sites. Because if you can knock the onion site offline by attacking certain nodes, if you're able to monitor those nodes at the same time, you could then correlate that to which onion site went down. So that's another point. De-anonymization can be done through different types of denial of service attacks. And that is the reason in many cases for these denial of service attacks on the networks. And it's also to sort of take confidence away from the network so that users don't think it's as reliable. So users are less likely to use it to connect to that sensitive site, that they may be easier picked up. If they're not using Tor, of course, they would be much easier picked up. But have you ever considered that the VPN service provider could also be running the exit node? See, you don't need to control the middle node if you're able to control the entry and the exit at the same time. So the middle node, it adds a layer of separation, a layer of protection between this point and this point from being directly correlated. So the middle node has a very real purpose. And when you're connected to an onion site, there's several other nodes in between there. So you have several additional hops when you connect to an onion site at all times. It's also end-to-end encrypted anytime you're connected to an onion site. This also goes for I2P, so take that into consideration. But I do think that on the grand scale of things, the best way to attack Tor would be to run a VPN service and then to also try and control as many exit nodes as you can, or at the very least, to be able to monitor the traffic, the connections between those exit nodes' destinations, and then also the user to that VPN that just happens to also be monitored to be connecting into Tor. And so this type of traffic correlation can occur and can be further manipulated through just internal actions of that VPN service. That VPN service can create downtime for you in order to detect which sites are having trouble, which nodes are having trouble in the exit end, while they must be also being able to monitor that. So it's not just any VPN provider can't do this. They have to have extraordinary access to the exit node to destination connections. And in that way, they could potentially work as an entire operation, possibly funded in heavy numbers. Now, I'm not saying you can't trust them. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying to err on the side of caution here, that VPN providers may not be what they seem. And I wanted to give this behind the scenes, just kind of talk about some of my own theories on this and why I'm hesitant to recommend VPNs. I think there's good reason. But I also am not just here to talk about problems. I also want to tell you what I think you can do about it. So, using a bridge, that's what most people should do. Use a snowflake bridge. Now, the Tor project does actually reach out and keeps in touch with Tor node operators. And it is expected to have, the ability to integrate yourself into the Tor community to be more trusted as a node operator. So it's not just anybody can do this, but there is a real possibility that VPN service providers, at least the ones that are malicious, which we know some are malicious out there. After the Snowden leaks, VPN providers came out. It just so happened to correlate after the Snowden leaks. Now, this could just be a natural reaction to the Snowden leaks, that VPN service providers would come out and say, hey, we've got a way to protect you, because it was just perfect timing. I mean, 2013 is when VPNs really took off. And originally, a VPN wasn't even for privacy at all. It was just a way to connect to a business. So a VPN server originally was intended just to give a secure connection between employees and the company network. So it never was actually invented for privacy to begin with, but it could serve to protect your IP address from wherever you're directly connecting to. So, for instance, if this was a website, your website wouldn't see your direct IP address. And if it was a malicious website, it wouldn't be able to attack you. So there are purposes to a VPN protecting your IP address from a potentially malicious destination, that they wouldn't be able to identify you directly from that connection alone. They would have to have extraordinary access or work with that VPN service provider. And that is why these VPN companies have such immense power over users' privacy. They're given the keys. The trust is a must with a VPN provider. And I'm not going to say that I know which VPNs you can trust. What I would say is use your best judgment if you have to use a VPN. But what I would recommend to most people is just use a snowflake bridge. And if you feel extra need to protect yourself, you can easily connect to Tor with proxy, for instance. So you can actually put that in your configuration for Tor browser. Go right into your network settings in the browser. This is Unix, so I can't do that right here because it's not set up for that. But if you have a normal Tor browser, you can add a proxy to your settings. Now, the key point is you want to be as far away from exit nodes as possible. That is the whole point of Tor, to keep you as far away from the exit node as possible. So if you use a VPN that happens to also run a major number of exit nodes, you may be putting yourself at risk because that VPN server can monitor every connection that comes to it and all the data back and forth there. Of course, it'll be, encrypted as you're connecting through Tor and all. But the fact of the matter is, just with the correlation of the packets, just with the correlation of the amount of data that's being downloaded can be correlated if they're able to monitor those exit nodes. And by running them, that would be the perfect way to do it. I did want to bring this up because I think it's really important to consider the VPN server could also be an exit node operator. So let me know what you think about this theory. Are you using a VPN to connect to Tor? Let me know in the comments what you think about this and the risk there. And like I said, use a bridge. If you're not sure about the VPN, use a bridge. And if you don't even feel comfortable with that, given that bridges are run by volunteers and the snowflakes in particular are run by normal Tor users on a large scale in their browser as a plugin. So in my opinion, that is the best type of bridge you can use for maximum anonymity. And then you could also add a proxy. So you can use things like proxy chains. You can use other options like in the browser. You can connect a proxy to connect to the bridge on Tor if you're that concerned. So let me know what you think, guys. What do you think about my theory on this? Is it a risk? And do you think maybe some of these websites might want to edit this and mention this risk? Well, I'm not sharing this publicly, at least as of today, but this video may become public because I don't want to give ideas, of course, to malicious parties. But you know what? My theory is this is already happening. And there's likely VPN service providers also attempting to run exit nodes. So choose wisely and use a bridge. And reconsider if you're not sure about your VPN. Because I've never said you need a VPN for Tor, because I think it may present more of a risk in a lot of cases than a benefit. That's what I got today, guys. I'd love to know your thoughts on this. You can share feedback in the comments or send me an email, write2privacy@i2pmail.org. And I will be back later with more on how to protect your security and privacy.